Oops. Right, Hawthorn. Today we are going to talk about one of the main features of fables that we didn't talk about yesterday, and that is the moral of these stories. So, our learning objective is to learn to recognise the moral of a story. So, what is a moral? Normally I'd ask you, you put your hands up, but obviously we can't do that. So, a moral, when it's being used as a noun, like it is in this sense, is a lesson that you can learn from a story or from an experience. So all of these stories are designed to teach us a lesson. Now, this is tricky because these stories were written a very, very long time ago. They're in theory written by a man called Aesop. Now, they possibly weren't because he possibly wasn't a real person, but one way or another, they are very, very old stories. And the thing about morals is they tell us how you're supposed to behave. But the way that we think you're supposed to behave now isn't necessarily the way people thought you were supposed to behave all the way back in ancient Greek times when these stories were being written, or at least some of them being written. So we need to be very careful as we go through these. Some of them seem perfectly sensible, and some of them you might read and think, oh, but that wasn't the wrong thing to do, or that's not a good thing to do. I think that's quite bad. That's because things change. People's morals change. People's opinions on what is right and what is wrong change. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through two of the stories, the two stories that I went through with you yesterday, and I'm going to talk to you about what their moral is. And then I'm going to give you some more stories that you're going to go through yourself, and you're going to tell me what the morals are, and then answer me a few questions. If you have time after that, there's another piece of work as an extension. That's an option that you can do if you have time and it's all going brilliantly. So, the first story, The Hare and the Tortoise. The hare was once boasting of his speed before the other animals. I've never yet been beaten, he said. When I put forth my full speed, I challenge any one here to race with me. The tortoise said quietly, I accept your challenge. That's a good joke, said the hare. I could dance round you all the way. Keep your boasting till you've beaten, answered the tortoise. Shall we race? So a course was fixed and a start was made. The hare darted almost out of sight at once, but soon stopped and, to show his contempt for the tortoise, lay down to have a nap. The tortoise plodded on and plodded on, and when the hare awoke from his nap, he saw the tortoise was just near the winning post and could not run up in time to save the race. Then said the tortoise, plodding wins the race. Now, what does that story tell us? Well, it tells us that the tortoise was right and that the hare was wrong. But what did the hare do that was wrong? Well, it was sleeping. So you could say, well, the moral of the story is sleeping is bad, but that's not true. It could be don't sleep during a race, but that's very specific. And these stories are supposed to tell us something much broader, much more important than a very specific when racing against tortoises, don't sleep. Well, what's this one telling us? This one's telling us, well, you could say doing things quickly doesn't mean doing them well. That's a true thing, and that's an important thing in life. It could be, we could look at it from the tortoise's point of view. It could be, even if you don't think you can succeed, give it a go because you never know. It could be, don't be overconfident. Even if you think you're going to win, you've still got to put effort in. So those are all possible morals. So a possible moral I could have, let's see, is my pen working? Pen. So I could say the moral is don't be overconfident. The moral could be doing things quickly isn't best. Doesn't, yeah, I know. How about doesn't mean you do them well. The famous one for this is slow and steady wins the race, but that's kind of what it means. Could put do things slowly and properly. So you're just basically going to need to think about, what do you think that story was trying to tell us? What did the character that gets something wrong do wrong? And what should they have done? What we're trying to teach people? What is the moral of the story? So the next one, the fox and the crow. A fox once saw a crow fly off with a piece of cheese in its beak and settle on the branch of a tree. "That's for me, as I am a fox," said Master Reynard. And he walked up to the foot of the tree. "Good day, Mistress Crow," he cried. "How well you are looking today! How glossy your feathers, how bright your eye! I feel sure your voice must surpass that of the birds, just as your figure does. Let me hear but one song from you, that I may greet you as the Queen of Birds." The crow lifted up her head and began to caw her best, but the moment she opened her mouth the piece of cheese fell to the ground, only to be snapped up by Master Fox. "That will do," he said. "That was all I wanted. In exchange for cheese I will give you a piece of advice for the future. Do not trust flatterers." Well, what's the moral of this one? What went wrong? Well, you could say don't open your mouth when there's cheese in it, but that's a very specific thing. We need something. What's really going on here? Well, the fox is being nice and kind and flattering, but he didn't mean it. He wanted something. Flatter's a good word there. He uses it, flatterers. Flatter means to say nice things to people, even if you don't necessarily mean it. So let's put something like don't trust people who flatter you. Especially if you have something they want. There are other things you could say about this. You could say that the crow was too proud and she believed it too easily. So you could put something like pride comes before a fall, or don't be too proud, or don't think too much of yourself. You need to decide what you think this means. And actually what you get out of this may not be what the person who wrote it a couple of thousand years ago actually meant you to get out of it. Because like I said, morals change. Things change. So now it's your go. For each story, I want you to answer 4 questions for me. So in your book, you're going to do the date and the learning objective, and then you're going to leave a space. And then for each story, you can write me the title. So the title of the story, and then under that, you're going to answer 4 questions for each story. And there's 4 stories, so you'll do this 4 times. Title, 4 answers, title, 4 answers, title, 4 answers, title, 4 answers. Number 1, what do you think the moral of the story is? So looking at the ones we just read, what do you think the moral is? Well, you'll look at your ones, but like I did for the ones we just read, you need to say, do you think that moral is important today? And you might say, yes, I still think it's important not to listen to flatterers, or I still think it's important not to rush things. Or you might think, no, I don't think it's very important anymore. Number 3, do you feel sorry for any of the characters? These characters were designed to be, the baddies. The crow in that is a baddie, but you might feel sorry for her. You might think, oh, she was just, she was tricked. And do you agree with the story? Do you think that what happened was the right thing? Do you think, oh no, I think the fox was the bad person there. He shouldn't have got what he wanted. So here are your 4 stories. Number 1, the lion and the mouse. So this is one from yesterday. When a lion was asleep, a little mouse began running up and down upon him. This soon wakened the lion, who placed his huge paw upon him and opened his big jaws to swallow him. "Pardon, O king," cried the little mouse. "Forgive me this time, and I shall never forget it. Who knows what I may be able to do for you in return some of these days?" The lion was so tickled by the idea of a mouse being able to help him that he lifted up his paw and let him go. Some time after, the lion was caught in a trap, and the hunters who desired to carry him alive to the king tied him to a tree while they went in search of the wagon to carry him on. Just then the little mouse happened to pass by, and seeing the sad plight in which the lion was, went up to him and soon gnawed away the ropes that bound the king of the beasts. Was I not right? Said the little mouse. So what's the moral of this story? What does that tell you about very small people? What does it tell you about big people who think that they know everything? Did the lion really need help? Was the mouse really helpful even though he was a tiny little person? So you need to think about the moral of that one. The next one, the lion, the fox and the beasts. Again, this is one from yesterday. The lion once gave out that he was very poorly and summoned the animals to come and give him some company. So the goat came to the lion's cave and stopped there listening for a long time. Then a sheep went in, and before she came out, a calf came up to speak to the Lord of the Beasts. But soon the lion seemed to recover and came to the mouth of his cave and saw the fox, who had been waiting outside for some time. Why do you not come to pay your respects to me? Said the lion to the fox. I beg your Majesty's pardon, said the fox, but I noticed that the track of the animals have already come in. I've noticed the tracks of the animals that have already come to you, and while I see many hoof marks going in, I see none coming out. Till the animals that have entered the cave come out, I prefer to remain in the open air. So in this story, the lion is tricking the other animals to come into his den. Oh, come and see me! I'm so poor. I'm poorly. I'm so poorly. I'm so old. You know, I can't possibly hurt you. I want company. And then as they go in, he eats them. The fox isn't tricked by it. So you need to think about your moral. You could do the moral from the point of view of the fox. What is it the fox does that is clever? What are you not supposed to do? You could look at it from the point of view of the sheep. What did the sheep do that he shouldn't have done? You know, who should you trust and who should you not trust? Think about that for your moral. Then I've got two new ones for you. The dog and his shadow. Two new ones? Yeah, two new ones. It happened that a dog had got a piece of meat and was carrying it home in his mouth to eat in peace. Now on his way home, he had to cross a plank lying across a running brook. That's a river. A brook is a little river. As he crossed, he looked down and saw his own shadow reflected in the water beneath. They say shadow, but I think they mean reflection. If you look in the river, you can see yourself. So as he crossed, he looked down and saw his own shadow reflected in the water beneath. Thinking it was another dog with another piece of meat, he made up his mind to have that also. So he made a snap at the shadow in the water, but just as he opened his mouth, the piece of meat fell out, dropped into the water, and was never seen again. So here we have a greedy dog. He sees his reflection holding meat in its mouth, and he thinks, I'm going to have my meat and I'm going to have that dog's meat. Opens his mouth to nick the other dog's meat, which of course isn't real, it's a reflection, and he loses his own. So what does this tell you? What should you not do? What does it tell you about somebody who's already got something and they see somebody else with something that they want? What's the naughty thing that this dog should not do? Remember, fables are either a do this or a don't do this. So what should you do when you've got something good, and what should you not do when you've got something good? The next one was the last one of yours. The jay and the peacock. A jay is a type of bird. A jay, venturing into the yard where peacocks used to walk, found a number of feathers which had fallen from the peacocks when they were molting. That's when their feathers fall out. He tied them all to his tail and strutted down towards the peacocks. When he came near, they soon discovered the cheat, and striding up to him, pecked at him and plucked away his borrowed plumes. So the jay could not do better than go back to the other jays who had watched his behaviour from a distance, but they were equally annoyed with him and told him, it's not the fine feathers that make the birds. So here a jay, that's quite a small, plain-coloured bird, saw some feathers that had fallen from a peacock and decided to stick them to himself and then go strutting around like he looked cool and amazing. But all the peacocks realised that they weren't his and plucked them off him, and all of the other jays thought, well, that was silly of you, you shouldn't have done that. So again, the question being, what is the moral of this story? Now, this is one of the stories which I would question quite how fair that is. As a modern person, I'm not quite sure I like the moral of this one. It's kind of saying that the jay can't try and look better. He can't try and dress himself up. So I don't know. You need to decide yourself, is this a fair story? So That's your work. 4 fables. You have to tell me 1, what's the fable, and 2, 3, 4, just answer a couple more questions about them. The important bit is number 1 for each of them. Now, if that takes you a long time, then that's it. Stop there, that's fine. However, I have put an extension. If you have time and are happy with the work so far and would like to go deeper into one story, you can try this optional, if you want to, extension. This is a longer version of the dog and his reflection story. This is a newer version. They put reflection instead of shadow. It says by Tony Payne. It's actually by Aesop, rewritten by Tony Payne. So you can read this story. It's 3 pages long. And I'm giving you a picture of this as well as part of the assignment, so you haven't got to come and read it on screen. But you read this story about the dog, and it's a bit more complicated. It's got more detail. And then at the end of it, you've got 8 questions to answer. It's a bit like the comprehension papers that we normally do, and then 2 kind of moral questions at the end. But like I said, these are an optional moral stroke comprehension-y thing that you can do if you would like to. Okay, have fun everybody, and I'll see you in the next lesson.